Chinese culture and technology entered the Japanese islands in the 6th century CE by way of Korea. Shinto was, and still is, the indigenous and unofficial national religion of Japan. The essence of Shinto was the devotion to spiritual beings called kami. In between 1338 and 1860, Japan's history had 3 distinct periods: the Muromachi Period, the Azuchi Momoyama Period, and the Edo Period.
Japanese culture. No.
Technically that was better.
Japanese culture and language is directly descendant of that of Chinese. Japanese culture is centered around tradition and family. The native religion of Japan was Shinto. In 552 CE, Buddhism spread from Korea to Japan. Both of these religions played major parts in the culture and society of Japan. Buddhism is a religion and dharma that encompasses a variety of traditions, beliefs, and spiritual practices, largely based on original teachings attributed to the Buddha and resulting interpreted philosophies. The Edo period in Japan was from 1650 to 1868. The Tokugawa family of shoguns took over under the name Shogunate. They ran the country from the city of Edo, which is modern-day Tokyo. Technically ruled under the emperor, or Mikado, but he was just seen as a figurehead and had no real power. Zen Buddhism also became popular during this period. This focused on the natural perfection of the world and encouraged a minimalist lifestyle. The social order was split into 4 classes during this time: warriors, farmers, artisans, and merchants. Mobility between the classes was prohibited, meaning whatever class you were born into was a class you were going to stay in. For example, if your dad was a farmer, then you were going to be a farmer, and everyone in your family after you was also going to be a farmer. Samurai warriors were the highest ranking class during the Edo time period. Ninja warriors also originated in this time period, and they practiced not only martial arts but unconventional warfare. They were typically used as spies and guards. These warriors were highly romanticized then as well as now because they're freaking ninjas. And ninjas are cool as There were 3 different types of traditional theater during this time period: No, Kabuki, and Bunraku. No is typically performed in shrines and temples on an open square stage with a roof and a painting of a pine tree on the back wall. The style of No uses symbolic movements, stylized masks, and intricate costumes. Kabuki began around 1600s and used singing and dancing to retell history. In the beginning, they were performed by women in the Yoshiwara, or red light district, of Edo, but they were soon outlawed from performing. This led to the art form being performed by men dressed as women. The costumes they wore greatly influenced what the public wore. Craftsmen had to work hard to create bigger and better costumes for the actors to make them stand out from the audience. Bunraku is a type of Japanese puppetry founded in Osaka in 1684. These were very large puppets that needed several puppeteers, or ningyozukai. They also had cantors, called taiyu, and musicians. Monza is a type of stand-up comedy that originated in the Heian period as a New Year's festivity, but became a normal part of Japanese culture during the 9th century. This is a type of slapstick comedy where the straight man, tsukomi, slaps the funny man, the bokeh, with the harrison, or a slapping fan, when he makes a stupid comment. Pleasure gardens were walk-in brothels called yukaku. In the 18th century, prostitutes became more sophisticated and highly trained, and were now called geishas. At first, geishas were only men, but women geishas emerged later on. Geishas were not primarily sex workers, and often started their training at an early age. They were taught a lot of things, like singing, dancing, playing music, reciting poetry, playing games, and how to converse at highly sophisticated levels. This led to the creation of floating worlds. These were private worlds run by women for men. There are different types of kimonos for different occasions. Furisode were used for unmarried women. These had wide baggy sleeves and were typically very colorful. Tomisode were worn by married women, and these had normal sleeves. A Monsuki is a black half coat with mons or family crest badges on it. This was worn with a hakama, which is a culotte-like garment tied at the waist and fell to the ankles. Haori was a half coat without insignias worn by men and women. Mauro Mage was a very complex hairstyle worn by courtesans and geishas. Tabi is an ankle-high split-toed sock. An obi is a large sash worn around the kimono. It can be tied in many different ways. The obijime was worn around the obi to keep it in place. This could also be tied in many different ways and had symbolic meanings. A sensu is a traditional Japanese folding fan that is typically painted with pretty designs. Zori are woven sandals worn by men and women. Geta is another type of wooden sandal that is elevated high off of the ground. This is worn by men, women, and geishas. Netsuke were tiny sculpted ornaments, often made of ivory or wood, worn by men suspended from their obi. Wagasa were traditional paper umbrellas. They were painted in different colors for different occasions. A nagajuban is a robe worn over the kimono to keep it clean. Yukata is an informal kimono, often worn during the summer. Kanzashi are long decorated hairpins worn by women, particularly in the late Edo period. Kosode is the forerunner to the kimono. It was a robe which crossed over the front and back and tied at the waist.
For storage, Japanese families would have tansu in their homes. These were stepped or rectangular storage cupboards in Japanese houses. When creating railings, Japanese would use the eskyua style. This meant that they would bring in swastika patterns on the railings. In Buddhism, swastikas meant good luck. Kakimono or kakijiko were hanging scrolls with paintings or calligraphies hanging on the walls. These were typically mounted with silk edges, with a backing roller stick attached at the bottom. This provided weight and also allowed it to be easier to be rolled up for storage. These were used in tokonoma, which is a niche or alcove in a private house or tea house that displayed a hanging scroll and a flower arrangement. Toro were Japanese lanterns that could be crafted in many different ways. They could be made out of stone, wood, or metal. They were often made to resemble miniature pagodas. Originally, they were sacred bronze hanging lanterns with light inside them to light the pathways in Buddhist temples, and later used in Shinto shrines. Natsume were tall round stone basins. These were used to plant gardens because the Japanese focused on agriculture. Japanese families would sleep on shiki futons. These futons were rolled up mattresses, and they were used in combination with kake futons. The Japanese were able to roll these up and store them away during the day so that they would have free space in their home. Seen in most Japanese homes and temples were the sudare. Sudare were bamboo curtains tied with strings, wool, or silk, and they could be rolled or fold up like Western blinds. The floor plans of houses were often determined by tatami mats. Each mat was approximately 3 feet by 6 feet and was made of a woven straw material with a fabric border around it. It also formed the basis of the modular system of dividing inner spaces in a Japanese house. Shoji were the delicate paper or fabrics that were highly decorated and covered lattice-like wood or bamboo sliding screens. Shoji were used to divide interior spaces and served a function as movable outside walls. Beiyobu were Japanese freestanding folding screens. They were especially beautiful and popular in Japan in the 17th century. They were decorated using paintings and other calligraphy styles. Ukiyo-e were woodblock prints of the later Edo period, and they frequently illustrated the seductive courtesans and geishas of the urban pleasure districts. They also showed kabuki actors, sumo wrestlers, and landscapes. They were aimed at the merchant and middle class, and they were not considered high art at the time. By the 19th century, these prints were in France and had a huge influence on French painting. Because shoji screens were often too short, Japanese families would add a rama in their home from the ceilings. Like Western transom windows, they allowed light and air into rooms and could be small shoji screens, or they could be intricately carved out of wood. Common residential houses were called minka and were very different because each style was dependent on the geographical location, urban or rural settings, as well as the social and economic status of the owner. However, if you were above the common residential house, have no fear, there were options for you as well. During the 13th and 17th centuries, a series of castles were built to resist local warlords and Western intruders, which were mainly the Portuguese. Wealthier houses were similar to the Chinese model, with a main hall oriented south, and a great example of these houses were seen in the Katsura Imperial Villa. Each home included a shrine, an extensive garden with a tea house, and pavilions intended for reflection, relaxation, and artistic pursuits. Torii are the entrances to a Shinto shrine and also seen in Buddhist temples that represent the gateway from the earthly world to the sacred spiritual world within. They are comprised of 2 upright posts with 1 straight lintel going across the top. Horyuji was the oldest Buddhist temple complex in Japan. It was commissioned by Prince Shotoku, who was instrumental in introducing Buddhism into Japan. The complex is made up of 21 wooden buildings and it is divided into 2 parts. And this complex is important because it showed the adaptation of the Chinese and Korean Buddhist architectural style to the distinct Japanese style. The Japanese pagoda was found within most temple complexes, and it was the Japanese version of the Indian Buddhist stupa. The pagoda could be made in many different styles and could be decorated anywhere from highly ornate or plain and simple. They were always 3 to 7 stories tall, but they were always an uneven number, and they were usually square. Pagodas had upturned corners on the roof with metal towers or finials at the top. Unfortunately, finials acted as lightning rods, as most pagodas came to know as they burned down due to lightning. And what would a period styles presentation be without talking about columns? Woo! Columns. Yikes. Japanese columns were made of wood and sat on stone bases. The columns were made using entasis, which took into consideration the human eye curving straight lines. Entasis purposefully curved these lines so that the human eye would perceive them as straight.